Hi, welcome to Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. I'm Brad White, joined by two good experts today, Dr. Philip Lancaster.
Hello, guys.
And Dr. Jason Warner.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So we're happy to have you with us because we've got a good question. And I want to pose this to you guys and get your answers. And as you answer, you'll get up to 10 points based on your answers. So this question from a listener is, I've heard a lot about liver abscesses. Are they important to me and my cow-calf operation? Jason, I'm going to start with you first.
So when we talk about liver abscesses, I think in the traditional discussion or the sense of, being something that we see primarily during the finishing phase of the beef production cycle or period, when we think about their relationship to cow-calf production, generally speaking, no, it's not something that's going to that have a direct implication on that cow-calf operation. But certainly if a producer is retaining ownership on a set of calves, throughout the finishing period, certainly liver abscesses are important and something that we've got to be cognizant of and really watching for.
Okay, excellent. So Jason starts out with 5 points because he talks about whether or not it's important to the cow-calf producer based on how they're marketing those calves. Philip, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it can be important. I think one of the things we don't really understand, we see it in the feedlot, and Jason's right there, but I'm not so sure that there's not things that we're doing prior to the feedlot that could be setting those calves up for predisposition to developing a liver abscess. And some of the stuff, the research that we've seen, there seems to be some information pointing toward that transition from a roughage diet to a high grain diet, so that transition. So if I'm a cow-calf producer and, maybe creep feeding my calf helps set him up better for that transition. Or maybe if I'm preconditioning and what I do preconditioning-wise sets him up better or worse for that transition and can cause different liver abscesses. So if we start to put that together, then there could be some financial implications to the cow-calf producer if we start to understand that better.
Well, and we know anything that affects the price of fed cattle will trickle backwards to the feeder calf price. So you could make an argument that as an industry, it still affects me whether or not I have anything to do about it. Mm-hmm. Depends a little bit on how these form. So I want to ask you guys from your perspective, let's talk about that aspect of how these liver abscesses form. And you got 5 points, Philip, so you guys are tied. So this answer is important, Philip. All right, go ahead, Jason.
Well, typically when we think about liver abscesses, it's primarily due to, some sort of breakdown in the integrity of the rumen wall or the rumen epithelial tissue. Oftentimes we think about it being associated maybe with lower rumen pH if we have a high grain intake or a starch intake into an animal. And over time, if we cause basically a wearing down or an eroding of that rumen epithelial tissue, then we can cause an infection. It'll wall off in the liver tissue. So those are the kinds of things I think we typically think about, or at least what we traditionally understand about an abscess and how it's formed and essentially what it is. But we'll see it at harvest time, absolutely.
Yeah. So we see those liver abscesses, and you talked about we'll notice them at harvest, and you gave a great description of how they form. So 8 points for Jason. Philip, I'm going to ask you, when do those liver abscesses form?
That's a great question. One thing that we've seen from research-wise is we can ultrasound the liver and we can see abscesses throughout the feeding period. We've done some projects where we've necropsied mortalities at the feed yards, and we see liver abscesses in those mortalities throughout the feeding period. But when exactly that insult to the rumen happened that caused the liver abscess, that's the part we can't visibly see, and you can't go back in time and find that or figure that out. So that's the difficult part. But as far as when they form, we know we see them throughout the whole feeding period, from early days on feed all the way right up to slaughter.
And to Philip's point, absolutely, when we think about producers, if they're going to be managing those calves and growing them during a typical backgrounding or growing period, depending on what that ration may look like and how those cattle are managed, could very well impact what we might see, later on when those cattle get into finishing. Mm-hmm. From an abscess standpoint, they may develop in that time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you guys are spot on that they can be important depending on your production system. It's also important to think about when they occur during that feeding phase and how can I manage for gut health throughout the period. So thanks for your answers. We ended up, Jason had 9, Philip had 8. So close on this one, but appreciate you joining us. If you have other questions, you can send them in at bci@ksu.edu.